I'm Outsfall Trades, and this is the Sunday Book Circle for The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The Handmaid's Tale is an account of an unnamed woman who is living in the religious misogynist nation of Gilead, the nation that replaced the U.S., when fertility issues made having children impossible for most people, creating societal instability. The leaders of Gilead performed a coup, taking over many states. Afterwards, they made women like the main character who had had a previous successful pregnancy act as incubators for the leaders. The society of Gilead is extremely rigid, and the main character wants nothing more than to get back to her own daughter, but is worn down by her time as a handmaid. Everyone knows about this book, especially since Hulu's modern TV adaptation of it, but it was still something people knew about, especially in the literature world, before that. It's got a highly sensational premise. How could it not grab people's attention? But did it deserve the attention it got when it came out? Does it hold up in today's world? Does it live up to the hype of decades of attention? Is it prescient with people like Alyssa Milano dressing up as a handmaid to protest Kavanaugh, or many women in DC doing the same to protest Amy Coney Barrett? Fuck no. I know that probably wasn't the reaction you were hoping for, but the fact that I even felt the need to ask those questions meant that the justification for the impact of the novel was up for grabs with me. I believe having been published when it was, at the tail end of second-wave feminism, meant more to its success than anything else, especially the crafting of the novel. It's hard for me to say that The Handmaid's Tale is one for the ages. Why did I read it? Well, because Atwood has written a sequel, which, yes, I'm going to read. It's only taken, 34 years and a critically acclaimed TV show to get back to Gilead. How close is the TV show to the novel? Let me put it this way. If you've seen the first season of The Handmaid's Tale, then you know the main plot behind the novel. Some things are changed, obviously, and more is added to the story than cut, but some things are cut. The thing is, though, besides the fact that it wasn't my cup of tea, like most dystopian narratives, the society depicted is just not sustainable long-term. I thought this when I read 1984, and I thought this while I watched The Handmaid's Tale, and while I read the novel. The idea that the issue of fertility can be solved without reproductive science being involved with both sexes is just dumb. If both sexes contributed to the issue, but only one sex was being addressed out of some idiotic and archaic idea that while they know that it takes two people to make a baby, the responsibility only falls to one of them to make that baby, then the problem will persist. How do I know they know it takes two people? Is the fact that they know intercourse is involved. The Greeks were idiots to think that men were the only seed from which humanity grew, while women were just like soil. Like, seriously? Children never look like their mothers? The people of Gilead take it to another level through willful ignorance that would bring down their entire society in just a couple generations. At most. Especially when IVF was invented in 1978. So by all rights, they should know that that has a better chance than some biblical ceremony to fix their problem. With most dystopias, the central premise is almost always so extreme yet so fundamentally flawed that they hold little terror for me because of their lack of stability. There is only one that I felt could be long-lasting, and that was Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. As one of the nicer dystopias, say versus The Handmaid's Tale or 1984, Brave New World is actually the scarier one. The dystopia genre is so geared towards extreme measures, extreme unbearableness, that the very thing that makes them extreme makes them practically impossible, which really takes a lot of the bite out of it for me. One could argue that no society lasts, but compare the stability of this particular situation versus the one in China. China could be argued to be a dystopia. Freedom of expression and economic growth are curtailed, family planning is dictated stringently by law, and what no intellectual predicted was that China's control of their people could survive and even thrive with the globalization and crowdsourcing of information and entertainment. Part of their ability to control the information and entertainment is non-Chinese private companies wanting to tap into the large market that is China and are willing to kowtow to the Chinese government's demands of censorship and control. This includes the giants of the internet industry and the video game and film industries. And while China's family planning laws have caused a crisis in recent years, nations without their same laws have suffered under the same crisis of an aging population with disproportionate distribution of the workforce across age brackets and a gender imbalance. But China was already working to solve it. But one thing that Gilead doesn't really have as a way of controlling its people that China does have is the circus. I don't mean the literal circus, but the entertainment of the masses. This is what most dystopian novels ignore, and it is the one thing that must be done for any society to survive. If people get a healthy dose of endorphins on a regular basis, the likelihood of mass rebellion goes down. Entertainment that is censored and bred to allow a citizen to get those endorphins without the fear of the provocation of thought is more effective than misery and hopelessness to get people to be complacent, because there will always be people who respond to a hopeless situation with anger and protest, especially if all they are given is misery and hopelessness. Others will just kill themselves, and that doesn't really keep a society going either. To walk the fine line between bearable and unbearable, a dystopia has to distract a citizen with something small that makes them happy, even if only for a moment, on a regular basis. There is far too little for the handmaids to do in Gilead. They have no repetitive form of entertainment, and the main character even comes to the conclusion that the commander wishes her life would be bearable, so he begins to entertain her with Scrabble, with girly magazines. But that is not the system by which the society controls the handmaids. They control them with the fear of punishment. Punishment and the fear of it as a method of behavioral control is by and large less effective than positive reinforcement. Hell, negative reinforcement is more effective than punishment. No, those are not the same thing. So I find this society unsustainable for two reasons. They are not really addressing the problems of infertility, and they are not using the best methods of control. That's good news for the people of Gilead, obviously, but for me, reading this novel, it lessens the effectiveness of the themes. Poorly constructed dystopias are typical because the machinations of the society are not the point. The themes that the dystopia is a vehicle for are the actual goal of the writer, but I would like for the structure on which those themes are displayed to be better crafted, instead of just slapped together so the writer can get the point across. It is far too common of a problem that I'm sure that most writers and readers don't even consider it a problem. Thus, most writers of dystopias don't really try harder to make the dystopias well structured. Since The Handmaid's Tale was so successful, it fed into this issue. The popularity for The Handmaid's Tale is indicative of a resurgence of feminism and the claim that we need it now more than ever. But reading this book actually makes me feel more complacent because, hey, it's not as bad as it supposedly could be. I'm still a major fan of the second wave feminists. Listening to their lectures is like having a person look into my inner life and put it into words. I don't really feel that way with third wave feminists because I often feel infantilized by them. They act as though by the happenstance of us having the same genitals, they can speak for me and know what I like and don't like and what I want from this world. Obviously, I don't like video games because I'm a woman and they feed into the male fantasy. Obviously, I've been sexually assaulted and don't trust men. Obviously, my sex has been a handicap in getting ahead in life, and I not only resent men, but my resentment is justified. Obviously, I want more female protagonists because there's never enough of them. Obviously, I hate the idea of being seen as sexual. Obviously, if I get drunk, I'm incapable of having my decisions being trusted by others. None of these things is true. I feel a great connection between the people of Gilead telling women who they are and how they are meant to behave, and how this recent batch of feminists also tell women who they are and how they are meant to behave. I don't want anyone to tell me based on something as circumstantial as my sex, who I am, or how I'm supposed to behave. I feel erased by this. I feel like someone's trying to control me. The people of Gilead honestly believe that what they are doing is somehow a gift to women, and the arrogance of that is what's so terrifying. I can handle individuals who think I'm lesser for my sex, which happens hardly at all if they know I'm a woman, and does happen far more often when they assume I'm a man. But what I can't handle is someone telling me for my own good what I should think and feel and fight for. The parallels of Gilead's false respect and reverence of women and that of real-life feminists bothers me. I'm not sure what a dictatorship in the opposite direction looks like. I just know that there's not a place for me there, just as I couldn't thrive in Gilead. But now I would like to talk story, so watch out for those spoilers. So I actually get the sense that The Handmaid's Tale has a theme besides body autonomy and patriarchy, which I've never heard anyone talk about: infidelity. I don't believe Atwood would have had the protagonist be the other woman before the forming of Gilead for no reason. This part interested me more than the stuff about her subjugation, which was mostly tedious. I don't need 30,000 words to know her situation is bad. Frankly, all I need is the sentence: they keep women as breeding chattel and control every moment of their lives for me to go, yeah, that's horrible. But the stuff about infidelity and the idea that this was another form of being a kept woman, the other woman, was far more interesting and subtle. The protagonist even related the commander's inability to speak with his wife as he did with her to the age-old excuse of cheaters saying that they just don't relate to their spouse anymore. I feel like if we ignore the protagonist's previous relationship, that we are missing a major piece of the puzzle. I also felt like Margaret thinking that the protagonist taking a man away from another woman was different than her taking women away from other women, as one being wrong and the other being unproblematic, was ironically shown to us. It's the kind of bullshit of one rule for you versus one rule for me that a lot of people like to use, and at the same time act like they have the moral high ground. No, wrong is wrong, and an excuse is still just an excuse. The other thing that The Handmaid's Tale does is examine the power of telling a story. Women cannot write in Gilead and are barely allowed to speak, thus they are not able to tell stories. The protagonist is trying to craft a story in her head to someday tell to someone if she ever gets the chance. The lack of speaking creates dissonance between the women, especially between the different sects of women: wives versus handmaids versus Marthas versus aunts. Divide and conquer seems to be the technique du jour of Gilead, as it's also used on the men, and to keep the men and the women separate. And the control of communication is part of it. But this is one thing that fell short in a couple of parts. At one point we are in a flashback to the Handmaid Training Center, and then we get a flashback there to the protagonist's life before the forming of Gilead. At which point I was like, really? Flashback within a flashback? There's not a better way to do that? Another point was when she had sex with Nick for the first time. One time of telling the reader this is how it happened, and then, but really this is how it happened, is fine. But doing that again is frustrating. At that point, I want to put the book down. Or in this case, close my reading app. It's asking too much of your reader to lie to them twice about the same thing. It feels like a cop-out, too. Like, oh, I couldn't decide which version of the scene was more impactful, so here's all of them. Don't do this. 3 versions is one too many. Now let's talk about the book's so-called importance to our current political climate. Ladies, stop dressing up as handmaids. It's not making the point you think it is. LARPing oppression is utter narcissism, the kind that deserves many trips to therapy. Also, stop screaming in your car, especially if you're driving. You're endangering the lives of others. Women's lives, especially in the US, are so much better than feminism makes it out to be. I can marry whom I choose, or if I will get married at all, if I will get divorced, how many children I will have, and when, if any, get an abortion, give my child up for adoption, sell my eggs, rent out my uterus, have a job, a car, own property, start a business, have a bank account and a credit card, get a loan, go to college, and more, and more. Compared to men, I have more reproductive rights, am more likely to win custody of children, more likely to be believed in domestic abuse accusations and find help or get away with domestic abuse, ditto with rape and sexual assault, all based on my sex. I'm less likely to die or be injured on the job, be homeless, commit suicide, have an untreated mental health condition, or be murdered. Again, all based on my sex. Women like Amy Coney Barrett are not interested in taking away my rights. People are comparing her to Serena Joy, if they even know who that is. But Serena Joy is a joke of a character, because US religion, as represented in The Handmaid's Tale, is a joke. I once lived in a town of 10,000 people that had more than 42 churches. The U.S. was founded because Englishmen got sick of monarchs telling them how to practice their faith, which means there isn't a church of the U.S. There's never going to be a church that dominates the U.S. because you're never going to get all the Protestants and Catholics to agree. That's the point. And a good number of those differing religions are incredibly pro-education and pro-women. And you can't even accuse me of arguing this to protect my religion because I'm an atheist. But I've met so many religious people and they are each of them individuals. And I have more in common with some of them than I do with most feminists. Mostly because a lot of religious people are actually capable of compassion, even for those different from them. Yes, even Christians. What I don't get, and what I'll probably never get, is how a Canadian writer thinks she knows so much about the multitudinous people of the U.S., the religious U.S., and just ignores one of the biggest founding principles of our nation, and ignores the second one, which would make an authoritarian takeover like this basically impossible. A big-ass chunk of U.S. Christians love firearms, including the women. It just makes no sense. The Handmaid's Tale is heavy reading. It has a huge cloud of importance following it. At this point, I'd say that no book could live up to that kind of hype. There are better novels out there, and better novels that cover women's lives. But tell me, what did you think? Do you like The Handmaid's Tale? Does it speak to you? Does it live up to the importance? Does it make you angry, uncomfortable, or depressed? Is there a book by Atwood you like better? Let me know in the comments below, and please mark all spoilers. Would you like to see what I'm currently reading? Follow me on goodreads.com/outsfalltrades to see what I'm reading right now and what book reviews you can expect in the future. I've made a Discord. I'm on it all the time and you're all invited to chat with me. There are channels for video games, movies, TV shows, books, and writing. Even a place for you to promote your own things. Join me there. Everyone is welcome. Merch, 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 merch. Yeah. Check out my new shop at cafepress.com/outsofalltrades for all kinds of products with my face on them.